Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. We're only the strongest roots, see the light. Brought to you by 𝗿𝗲𝗍𝗃 Candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, please like this video, share it, and be sure to subscribe. Today we're going to be going over a topic that is integral to Ifa and Orisha practice. It is known as the Mojuba, or more rustically known as the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏. And it is the opening prayer and homage that we provide to be able to not only begin a ceremony, but ultimately influence nature. What do you think about that, Phil?
Oh, sounds super interesting. Okay.
Sounds epic, right?
Yeah.
To really understand why we do this, we have to understand Yoruba culture. And ultimately, the Yorubas, forgive me, the Yorubas are all about respect. They're all about homage. And originally, Ifa is an ancestor-based worship. So when we look at the Mojuba, right, and we actually break down the phrase Mojuba, which means I provide homage or reverence or respect or I salute, it's basically a homage to all of those that came before us or things that came before us. So, when you look at it and you begin to, delve into it, it basically takes you through three basic stages. The first being what I like to call the spirit bomb aspect. And for all those that watch Dragon Ball Z, it's my favorite analogy because it's when Goku kind of called upon nature to send its energy to be able to defeat the foe. And that's kind of what we're doing.
Rest in peace, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏.
Yeah, absolutely. Fabulous.
I forgot his name.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it was 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏.
Yeah.
And, definitely because when we are going to be practicing Ifa, ultimately Ifa practice is to make offerings to nature in a way where we can try to influence it in our favor. So to be able to make the offering to nature, we need to identify with nature, where the first part of the Mojuba basically salutes the various aspects of nature that can help us, right? The sun, the moon, the stars, the cosmos, Mother Earth, certain symbolic and, indicative ingredients and parts that could provide the Ashe or the divine grace to be able to make a change, right? So that's the first part. After that, we delve into our ancestors. Now, in Cuba, just like in Nigeria, ideally, the ancestors that you mention are the ones from your lineage. At times, people tend to sway and start mentioning a bunch of really known, well-known guys and ladies that were a part of our practice, but never at the sacrifice of our own lineage, because we might not have known the more notable people, but no one's going to help us more than our own ancestors who ultimately form a part of a lineage that birthed us. So it will go through spiritual ancestors from Ifa and Orisha, blood ancestors, and all the people that came before. When we look at Ifa and Orisha concepts and practice, Orisha itself is the practice of honoring our ancestors. The Orisha themselves are people that were here and are no longer here and have been invoked so much that they've elevated to a point of deity or God, ultimately. So once we get through that part, at that point, I'd like to call it the Mojuba or the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 of the living, right? And the part goes into basically saying Ashe before a bunch of different personalities. So once again, Olofin Olorun Olodumare, the governor, the son, and God Almighty. We're going to invoke Orunmila, definitely from a 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 standpoint. Eshu, Ori, the head, our elders, the people who initiated us into Ifa or Orisha, our 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏s, the sacred women that help us fulfill our functions from a 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏 standpoint. Iworo, which are, the practitioners of Orisha, our mother and our father, most importantly, who create that divine link between this world and the next. And so on and so forth until we actually interact with the Orisha and let the Orisha know what we're doing and why we're doing it, right? So that's the way it's kind of constructed in Cuba, where when you'll see somebody doing the Mojuba, you'll hear them mention, gentlemen such as 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏, gentlemen such as Adeshina Obarameyi, Bernardo Roja Idetundedi, really a Hall of Fame selection of guys who were really the precursors of Ifa on the island, right? And beyond them, unfortunately, and this is an anthropological study for the future for sure, is where does this lineage connect to within Africa? When we talk about a gentleman such as Adesina or Barameji, also known as Remigio Herrera, this gentleman was said to be of the land of Oyo, which is one of the roots of our Ifa, right? One of the royal lands of 𝗀𝗄, where 𝗀𝗄 worship is very prevalent. From what I understand, he was a devotee of this Orisha as well. And, why do we invoke this gentleman? To be able to receive all the benefits that can come from him and where he came from. But it's very important to begin to really delve into the origins of these distinct men and women to understand our roots. Because, when you look at Lukumi practice, there's very distinct nuances as compared to, Isese at the moment. But it's not that what we do isn't legitimate. It's just it's influenced more by certain regions of Africa versus others. That's why when you go to Africa, there may be a basic template or framework, which we follow as well, but there's always going to be distinctions from clan to clan and village to village. But very important because our whole spirituality is based upon that. But when you look at the various odus that speak of this process, it becomes very apparent why it's necessary. One of the first odus that speaks of the process of the Mojuba is in the odu of Baba Ifa, the dawn of existence, the Big Bang, all of these different things. And what occurred was people noticed that there was a lack of spiritual fluidity. Their work wasn't getting a lot of attention or response from nature. They weren't really seeing the results of what they were doing. And at the end of the day, we practice Ifa because it provides results. So they performed divination where the Odu of 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗏 was revealed, where Ifa said that they needed to invoke nature, their ancestors, and their elders to be able to open up the portal, per se, and receive the blessings from all of these key figures and points to be able to have the effects they wanted to on nature, which they did. And when they did this, they faced the sun, they poured the libations of the water, which is what's occurring usually when we're doing this. When you hear the famous Omitutu, Onatutu, or fresh water or fresh path, we're usually pouring water when we do this. And when we did this and then we performed our rituals, we saw the results we were seeking. So from that day forward, right from the very beginning, in the Odu of 𝗹𝗶𝗏, it speaks of the importance of always providing Iba or Mojuba. That's why no matter what we do, we have to say this first, ultimately. Now, there's extended versions, there's shorter versions, but at the end of the day, there's certain key points that need to be mentioned to be able to get the effects that we're looking for, A lot of people reach out to me and they're like, Baba, we don't have Orisha crowned. We want to study, we want to learn, we want to get a little bit more involved, we want to have a little more autonomy. So can I learn the Mojuba? At the end of the day, you can. It's because technically people in Nigeria do an Iba or a Mojuba without being initiated because they're saying it in their native tongue, and they're saying Iba Baba and Iba Yeye, respects to my father and mother. You don't have to be crowned to say those kind of things. But where it does become more tedious is when, if it is a different language and it is something you have to repeat to be able to save or store within your memory, at that point, it can become somewhat redundant. There are people out there that I'm sure would do it every day, but there are others who are like, ideally I want to be using this as a means to an end, because most people learn the Mojuba because they become spiritual professionals and want to actually perform work. That's usually when on the New World we, learn these kind of things. But is it taboo? No, not necessarily, especially if you're in a apprenticeship stage where your elders are trying to teach you the things that you can learn before going into, a priesthood rite. So that's a very frequently asked question we get as well. But it really comes down to that. Really, invoking our ancestors. Ifa is all about remembering. And another odu that speaks of this concept as well is in the odu of Obeshe, which is a very similar concept to that which was in 𝗹𝗶𝗏. But in that story, it actually speaks of a gentleman. His name was 𝗃𝗍𝗍. Now, for those who have heard this phrase, you might have heard it before because you hear it on both sides of the ocean, For example, in Isese, you'll hear 𝗃𝗍𝗍, and you'll hear a response like ayabo, ayato, and things like that. And then in the New World, you'll hear 𝗃𝗍𝗍, 𝗃𝗍𝗹𝗁, which speaks of the other part of the story, which is in the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗃. But in the 𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗃, it speaks about when 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃 died, where 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃 was actually a gentleman in the 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃 that really saved the land. He provided results and was able to cleanse the land. Some people say he prepared the soap that is so famous in the 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃. Because of it, he became, basically regal. They made him king, they consulted him on everything, and he led a very fulfilling life there. But, the other epic is in the 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃, when he passed away, his funeral rites weren't carried out necessarily the way he wanted them to be, right? So with that came a lot of negativity, because a curse descended upon the land of Ijebu, and they were trying to understand why things were going so negatively, when at one point with this gentleman, they had become so prosperous. When they performed divination, you can interpret either 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗃 or 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃 was revealed, because it's a two-part story between two different Odus about the same gentleman. They realized that they had made a fatal mistake, because they had to make offerings to Egun. And the Egun that they found was actually 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃's remains in the jungle unattended to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which was pretty sad, because the guy had basically saved the land. And when they made the offerings and his spirituality presented itself, he said, I'll lift the curse, but from this day forward, you always have to mention me to be able to receive my blessing. That's why, to begin any even Mojuba or any process within Ifa, you'll notice the 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁 immediately, like when we're trying to get reorganized or regroup or focus, after some casual conversation, or we're about to begin, we'll say 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃, and on this side of the world, we say 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗃𝗃, or the priest of 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗃 that saved the land of Ijebu, or over there, they'll say 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃, and a couple other things, basically saying, may I be provided with longevity, health, and may what we're about to do bring those things.
Can you say it like a person without any any cultural background,
any seasoning?
Please.
It is 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃 or 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that was basically the gentleman's name.
I thought you said 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃.
𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. Yeah. As the quicker you say it, certain things get lost, but ultimately, it gets recognized. But yeah, his name was 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. And, once again, it makes reference to this concept of, to be able to move forward doesn't mean we forget about the past, or we can't mention the past or the people that came before us. The past may not exist, but those people definitely did, and we wouldn't be here without them. So when talking about the Mojuba, the other aspect that has to be taken into account besides our ancestors is ultimately nature as well, once again, because 𝗃𝗶𝗃 really focused on the celestial aspect of things. But when we go to the 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃, it speaks of a story where 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 wanted to begin basically farming, right? 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 is the Orisha of the farm, or the farmer, the planter. And he started opening holes in earth, really without getting consult from Orunmila or any of these things. And he started excavating the earth and retrieving yams, right? Planting them, selling them. He became very affluent. But then out of nowhere, he pretty much lost everything. His yam crop went belly up. Forgive me. And, he was looking for answers as to why all of this was occurring. So he went to visit Orunmila, where the 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃 was revealed, where Ifa told him that he had to visit 𝗃𝗏𝗃 to be able to get clarity. And when he did that, 𝗃𝗏𝗃 was very, angry at him. He said, you didn't ask me for permission. You didn't give me any, anticipation of what you were about to do. And now that everything's gone wrong, because now the envy of your enemies has ultimately destroyed you, now you want to seek my counsel and help. Forget about me. I'm not going to help you at all. I want you out of my house. But maybe go to the mountain, and the mountain will go ahead and give you some sound advice, right? And when he went to the mountain basically told him the same thing. He said, you didn't seek me. You didn't seek any of my advice or my approval for any of the things you did. And he threw rocks at him. And 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 went running to the ocean. And the ocean told him the same thing and basically spit water in his face, you know. So he was literally rejected by some of the most key points in nature and, you know, his creator.
Jeez.
So he went back home and, you know, he started crying to his wife, Mother Earth, and the tears fell on the earth. And he was like, why is this happening, you know? And she was actually the most annoyed with him out of all of them. She said, you know, you didn't take my advice when opening this business. You didn't make me a partner. You have the audacity to open a hole in me. You know, excavate our children, the yams, sell them, you know, roast them, all of these different things. And I don't even get as much as a thank you, you know. And she got so angry that she opened up a hole and she swallowed him alive.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the end of 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝗏. So once again, we see the concept of we have to ask permission. We have to seek advice and approval from our ancestors. And our ancestors before human beings, Ifa says, were the trees. You know, and was nature and, you know, all of these different things. Because if you look at the organic material that composes us, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, when we get put back in the earth, a tree basically consumes us or the earth or whatever material it can gain from it. These are places that need to be taken into account. And 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝗏 did not, and nothing went well. He didn't perform his Mojuba. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't invoke. He didn't do all these other things. And because of it, it went very negatively for him. So that's another example of why it's so important to incorporate that. But finally, one of the next things that are super key is going to be the blessings from the living and our elders, whether it be our elders that are family, such as our mother and father, or our elders of our spiritual mothers and fathers, whether it's padrinos, madrinas, etc. You know, the Odu Osache says that the good child or the good, you know, offspring always has the blessing from their parents, where, you know, there is no greater curse than that which can come from our parents, because our way to heaven is through two people or two sets of people, our parents and our children. And one day they'll occupy that role and have to repeat, because the only reason we're here is because of them, regardless of anything else that could mitigate that. But, you know, there's various odus where, you know, 𝗏𝗏𝗏 really made it very clear to his children that they needed to seek his counsel and, you know, provide that respect to receive the blessings and Ashe they were looking for to get the results that they needed. In the odu of Baba Ifa, it speaks of when 𝗏𝗏𝗏's children turned on him and they actually mistreated him and, you know, undermined him and disrespected him to the point where he said, I don't even want to see them again. I kind of want to, you know, disappear. And he actually retreated to heaven. He floated back into heaven alive.
Oh, man.
But when he was gone, now things were going negatively for his children because they didn't realize the intangible blessings that he was providing when he was happy with them. So they went looking for him. And Ifa says that they invoked heaven and they invoked 𝘄𝗀𝗄𝗏𝗏, who was the 𝘄𝗄 that guards the doors of heaven and earth, or the barrier and border. And they told him, we want to see our father. And 𝘄𝗄 went inside to tell 𝗏𝗏𝗏, hey, your sons are here. And 𝗏𝗏𝗏 told them, you know, I appreciate them, but I really don't want to see them. Let them know that they can invoke me and receive my blessing, but personally, I'll never be around them because I can't trust them.
Wow.
And, you know, that's till this day, the Babalaos, we invoke our elders. You know, luckily, some are here, some are not, maybe. But it also refers to our parents as well, where, you know, without the blessing of these people, the doors of heaven don't open to us. You know, we have to invoke for 𝗄𝗄 to be able to relay the message to 𝗏𝗏𝗏 to be able to have an effect. If I want to do a reading, if I want to do a sacrifice, if I want to do an initiation, everything has to start right here. And this concept is really across Africa. You know, you look at any of the traditional faiths, there's always an opening invocation and you're always mentioning your ancestors, your living elders, and the deities and energies at hand. Where, you know, in some people's Mojuba, such as mine, they mention the various Orishas, Eriwoyas mentioned as well. You know, Ashe and 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, who were 𝗏𝗏𝗏's disciples. You know, or in some versions, the people that initiated 𝗏𝗏𝗏. You know, it's one of those things where you pay your dues and you really pay attention to those that came before you or could have a positive effect on you, the same way one day we want our children and the people we've helped to do the same. And it's just overall spiritual courtesy.
You know, you mentioned that when he went up to heaven and then things started happening, it reminded me. I keep giving quotes that my dad said. Is that when something's done right, people think nothing was done at all.
Yeah, no, you don't know things or how they are until something. I mean, God bless the dead. Hopefully, everybody's okay. But look at the bridge situation. Horrible. But I mean, no one realizes it until a catastrophe happens, right? So it's a perfect example. You don't know what you have until it's missing. So that's over here on the Lukumi side, right? When we look at the 𝘃𝗵𝗃𝗵𝗃, there's various ones, just like there's various ones on our end. I mean, there's also another one that can be found in the 𝘃𝗵𝗹𝗁𝗍 from a Lukumi standpoint. But from a traditionally 𝘃𝗃 standpoint, there's a verse in 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍 which says, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍 adifafun iba tisheo Mojuba. And that's the first part of a very long, much longer prayer. But in the Odu of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍, it speaks of a gentleman named Iba, right? And he was the son of Oduduwa. And, obviously his father being king, the Onife, he was trying to figure out, what am I going to do to be remembered here? Because I just don't want to be remembered as Oduduwa's son, right? And, he went for divination where this Odu of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍 was revealed. And Ifa told him to perform sacrifice to not only be remembered for all time, but be the first one mentioned. And he did that. And he performed fabulous spiritual work. He really upheld the virtues his father taught him. He was an individual. He was innovative. He was different from his father in all the right ways and similar in all the right ways. So the day that he passed, he left such a profound effect and impact on his people. They said we will always commemorate this man by saying Iba before we start any ceremony. So Mojuba, he's still there on our side, and then over there it's just the Iba, which means reverence, right?
Are all the words in Ifa like split like that by the syllables? Like they all each have I'm not really good at English, but so like the first part of the word is another word.
It can be,
and then the next part of the word is another
can
meaning.
be. Yeah, it's a lot of compound words and things like that. And then when you look, I mean, you can have one letter and an accent's going to the left, and that's a word. And if it's going to the right, it's a word. And if it's a dot under it, it's another word. Like single letters. So it's a beautiful language. It's tonal. It's almost like a hymn, but I'm not fluent, and I don't anticipate to be, simply because you don't necessarily have to be functional or proficient within practice. You have to know enough to get through a ceremony, though. So it does take some study. It's definitely a process. It's hard to learn if you don't have a bunch of Yoruba friends to just talk with, so. But that's in 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍 where the Iba was born, So it speaks of, in that verse, how nothing will be blessed without saying Iba. So everything we have to do has to begin with this concept. But that's actually the traditional verse where their Iba was born, or overall all of our Ibas, because if we go all the way back to Africa, that was the first one in the Odu of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍. And the interesting thing is the connotations with Oduduwa, because technically we're all Omodua, or children of Odua, and as his children, we pay homage to our ancestor Iba to be able to, invoke him and Odua and all these people that passed away before us to be able to get those results. And the beautiful thing is you see the similarities between both of our practices, especially in the Iba. We mention a lot of the same things. We mention Olodumare, we mention the earth, 𝘃𝗵𝗹𝗁𝗍𝗁𝗍, 𝘃𝗵𝗹𝗁𝗍𝗁𝗍, which are the energies of the right and the left. You see a lot of really common themes between both of them that lets us know and comforts us in knowing that we come from somewhere. And be it not for the Iba, we might not know, because if we don't invoke these people, time passes, memory, if it's not being consistently recited, anything will be forgotten. It's like the Odu 𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗍 says that the memory of a good man will never die. The memory of a moral man will never die. So that's really all what we're striving for, because through Iba we become Orisha, and all we're trying to do is leave a positive effect on our family and loved ones to one day be remembered in a positive light and say, hey, he was a good guy, or that was a great lady. So it's probably the most integral part of our faith, because without it, we literally can't do anything. And a lot of young Babalawos come in sometimes. They're like, man, do I have to say this thing that much? And yeah, we do, so it's definitely integral.
That's interesting. It's good to know that these sayings all have like these origins, and it's good to go dive deep in the rabbit hole with that.
Yeah, everything. And, it's one of those things that really gets overlooked because it's so monotonous. But when you actually break it down and look at how the various lines, really resonate. For example, my Mojuba starts with 𝗀𝗶𝗹𝗁 olofin, 𝗀𝗶𝗹𝗁 olorun, 𝗀𝗶𝗹𝗁 olodumare, 𝗀𝗶𝗹𝗁 olode. And 𝗀𝗶𝗹 means I put my head towards, right? And, olofin is the governor. It makes reference to Odudua as well. Olorun is the sun. Olodumare is the supreme creator. And lode means outside. And it's actually making reference to Eshu, right? And then you say Mojuba, which means I give homage. Otungnioba, which means the right hand is the hand of the king, or the hand of power. And with that, you drip some water to the right. 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗀𝗍, which means the left hand is the one that gives the blessing. That's the reason we use the left hand to put on the ide, the bracelet. Egun 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗀𝗏, which means Iku, or death, is always trying to marry the Babalawo because he is the one who has the knowledge to be able to avoid dying. So death, in the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏𝗏 wanted to kill Orula, but Orula, through his shrewdness and performing sacrifice and the trickery of Eshu, was able to outlast death in the fasting competition, where death,
how do you do that?
Yeah, well, what happened is in the Odu of Baba Ifa was where death wanted to compete with Orunmila, because Orunmila was the biggest obstacle between her basically consuming at free will, even before people's destined time. So she concocted a competition that she didn't think Orunmila was going to be able to, win. And, she said whoever can stay in a room longer without eating, they win and they get their will. Her will was if he lost, she'd eat him and eat everybody. And if he won, he would be able to construct a way to be able to identify people when they were meant to pass and they couldn't die before then. So the competition began, and by the second day, Orula was like, oh man. But he performed divination. He invoked Eshu. He made promises to Eshu, offerings of what he had. And he said, if I get out of here, you'll be the first person I feed. You have my word. And Eshu in the evening would bring and sneak Orula food through his window, right? So no one ever saw Orula leave, and Eshu is the darkness, so no one ever really realized. But, after 7 days, death was like, I think I'm going to die, or I'm going to lose it. And one evening, death actually snuck out and started eating food out of the garbage, and Eshu whistleblowed on her and, basically announced that death had lost the competition. And Iku knew that Orunmila did something underhand, but she couldn't prove it either. So she said, what are your terms? He said, I understand that people have to transition, and that's fine. But I just want it to be at the time that's predestined, so we respect each other's position. So the ones that are wearing the green and yellow bracelet, leave them alone until I say. And Death said, all right. And then the pact was solidified. Like when you look at a bracelet of Ifa, when they tie it, that tie of the thread or the clasp that closes represents the pact between Orunmila and Death in the Odu Baba Ifa, which is where the Iba was originally born.
Wow. That's, man, I might have lost some words for that one.
Yeah, it's a banger. And then of course he fed Eshu right afterwards. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But after that, you have phrases like Omi Dudu, Ona Dudu, Ile Dudu, Dudu Nini, Dudu La Roba, Tutu 𝗁𝗿𝗍𝗁𝗍, which is basically at that point you're dripping water on the floor, saying Omi Dudu, fresh water, Ona Dudu, a fresh path, Ile Dudu, a fresh home, Dudu Nini, a fresh ambiance or fresh energy. When we say 𝗁𝗿𝗍𝗁𝗍, we're making reference to the water that's on the malanga leaf or the coco leaf or the sacred pots where, the ceremonial liquid is prepared with said herbs. And it just goes into, 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 olorun, 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗁𝗀. You start delving into the different aspects of the cosmos, the moon, all of these different things before it leads us into invoking our ancestors. The Egun of the four corners, which are in the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗁𝗍. All of these really key things that if you don't study and you don't know, you really wouldn't have an idea. And there's another thing. A lot of people say, and I think this is an important topic, anyone can say whichever Iba they choose. Like some people now have a concept that there's a Mojuba of Ifa versus a Mojuba of Orisha. At the end of the day, the Mojuba is the Mojuba. There's allegories, there's things you can add, there's things you can subtract, but there's certain key things that have to be there in every single one. You have to mention ancestors, you have to mention the sun, the moon, and all of this is in various odus like the ones we've mentioned. But it's very, very key to make sure that it is competent and it is full. And I'll never forget my Yubona when because as soon as you learn the Mojuba, you go running to your elders like, wow, I learned something, of note. And I'll never forget my Yubona, 𝗵𝗍𝗵𝗀𝗲, he said, if you learn the Mojuba, there's nothing you can't learn in this religion. You will never learn a prayer longer than the Mojuba. And he was completely right, It's a confidence booster to the umpteenth degree. It's the sign of a great beginning. But, to be frank with you, a lot of people don't even make it past the Mojuba.
How come?
I mean, some people just, it's too imposing for some people. They're like, I'm never going to learn this, or they don't want to go through the mental anguish of learning it, So it really is a determining factor. I mean, everybody in the spirituality, if you're here, it's because you're meant to be here, but everybody's meant to do different things. But if you don't learn the Mojuba, it's a pretty good indicator that you're not meant to handle clientele because, once again, without it, we're not going to have much of an effect anyway. So it's one of those things you have to. I'm sure in film, hey, you have to learn how to, mount tape or whatever it may be. Forgive my ignorance, but there's certain things, especially in the beginning, like, the old reels, watching too much TV. But, it's one of those things, and I'll never forget when he told me that, it made perfect sense. And ironically, he's 𝗀𝗵𝗵𝗏, where the story of 𝗵𝗏𝗹𝗁, the first half of it is. So, and it's really key to identify your lineage, understand where we come from so we understand where we're going. But ultimately, the Mojuba is the Mojuba. So, like I said, there's differences, but, sometimes you have to make sure that we understand what we're doing because, there's Mojubas that are seen as more Ifa-centric when in reality, that is the base Mojuba. So as long as certain things are there, people can really say whatever they want, technically in the order they want. Like I've met brothers that their Mojuba is completely backwards from mine, where they'll start with the living, proceed with the dead, then identify. And, at the end of the day, however you serve it doesn't matter as long as the plate has what it needs.
Yeah, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? That's the term.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? And definitely more than one way to build a violin. So, you have to respect people's lineage and clan. And another interesting story is, this actually was very integral when it came to identifying and verifying people's credentials. Because in Cuba, when you were not part of the house and you were invited, when you would do the Mojuba, they knew where you came from. Because back in the day, you only mentioned the Babalaos and people from your lineage. So a lot of guys would just stay there listening to the brother working and be like, oh my God, you're said person's godson. And be like, yeah. And then, it's like, oh my God, I know your godfather. Like it was a moment of encounter. But there's moments for that. It's not that we just go into a ceremony saying I'm this and I'm that. Your time will come to be able to announce and kind of sound off, right? It's kind of like when the cues hit the yard, you know what I'm saying? So you kind of, you throw up your house, you know what I'm saying? But, it's a thing of great pride and it's a thing of great practicality. And, it's the first step towards a very successful career, but everything has a reason. Everything has a translation. I'm a big advocate for knowing exactly what you're saying when you say it. And that's actually one of the laws of Ifa is you can't say things you don't know or don't understand. So definitely for all the people that want to learn or have learned the Mojuba, definitely get with your elders. It should be translated by now. You should be able to get the clarity as far as what you're saying because, that's very key because when you know what you're saying, you say it with much more fervor and it's only going to lead to, better results. But definitely one of the most integral things in our faith.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, though, when you say referring to your elders, though, you did mention many, many months, maybe even a couple of years ago that there aren't that many.
In what regard?
There aren't that many elders, right?
Oh, no. Well, the thing is, man, there's a huge changing of the guard that's happening. We've lost really key people within, even since I did Ifa 8 years ago. And within the last 3 to 4 years, man, we've lost some real titans, really incredible 𝗀𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗍𝗶 and Babalaos and people that were real leaders and beacons. to our people who are going to really be, taken into that Hall of Fame, that select group, and being recognized as real pioneers. But the question is now is if we don't know where we're from and we don't know who we are, we'll never have an idea of where we're going. Yeah. So, overall, there is a little bit of a lack, especially within the Lukumi aspect of things, because I feel like Lukumi is beautiful. It's gorgeous. I've dedicated my life to it. I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to it. But it's a thing of pockets at this point. It's a thing of clans at this point. Overall, there is a deterioration of study. There is a deterioration of pedigree and grooming. But there are houses that are holding this, and obviously ours and some of the ones we've interacted with. You got some really great professionals out there. But overall, I think the Mojuba is a lasting reminder to we have to step it up. We have to make sure we know where we're from to know where we're going. Because if, for example, you have, people that don't know their Mojuba, you have people, that are a little bit underqualified when it comes to credentials and, knowledge, taking on tasks that they're not prepared for, which once again goes against the laws of Ifa and is a huge taboo. You're never supposed to conduct ceremony you're not prepared for or haven't studied for. And we're seeing that more and more again. Maybe economics is the motivator. Maybe social status is, the driving force there. People trying to seem like something, people trying to, gain a certain income. But, it's like when you would start as an apprentice, I don't know, in martial arts, like, hey, go fold the gi. Hey, go make tea for the master. You know what I'm saying? Or hey, practice hitting this board 1,000 times before you switch hands. That's what this represents. This repetition. Ifa is not an easy thing. Ifa is not an easy thing in any aspect. Whether you learn the drum, whether you learn Ifa practice, it's a lot of repetition. It's a lot of solitude. And, I don't know if the majority of society really wants to go through that again. I think COVID, and I cite it quite a bit because, having gone through that, I noticed the stark difference in culture and societies before and after. I don't know how much pain people want to go through anymore.
Exactly.
But the thing is if we don't accept pain and we don't accept sacrifice, where are we going? Because that's what's gotten us here as a civilization. And if overall everybody wants to be a YouTube influencer, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, obviously we're very blessed, but all I'm saying is there has to be substance behind what we're purveying as far as an image, because once again, there's a lot of guys, hey, I have a Ferrari. Hey, I don't work for this. Hey, I have a bunch of people working for me. Hey, I don't have a wife. Hey, things that really don't add up. So it's the same thing with our spirituality where, you have people with God kids, you have people with, a lot of things that might be visible, but, in the trenches, they might not know how to hold their weapon, or use their tools. So that's really another, resounding message from this video is one thing leads to another. And this goes out to a lot of the new initiates, just like the old. If you're just getting initiated, really follow the pace that your elders are trying to put you on, because if they've shown that up until this point, ultimately they want what's best for you. So with a crucial step like this, sometimes we see it as so boring. We want to get to the exciting stuff, But to be able to get there, we have to go through here to be able to build the discipline to be able to handle those other tasks. Or if you are initiated already for quite some time, we have to reinitiate ourselves. For example, I have known my Mojuba now for 8 years, cleanly. But every time I initiate a new 𝗶𝗏𝗧 or my wife initiates somebody in Orisha, I go right back to the beginning. I have to clarify things for them. I have to make things, apparent for them. So it's a refreshing of things.
When we may not put this, but when the lineages cross, like, is there ever any physical clash?
I mean, when you talk about cross, are you referring to?
Well, let's say two families come together, like a wedding or something like that.
Like it's not so much as marriage as much as collaboration at that point. Like, for example, if I'm initiating somebody into Ifa and let's say the Yubona or the second godparent is from another house or the guy directing it is from another house, I mean, that's happened. As far as clashes, the clashes only come from a lack of coordination. So, for example, before we go into ceremony or before we, kick off, we have to be fully coordinated, and we have to walk through the ceremony together, discuss it beforehand, and everybody needs to be on the same page as far as how we're about to do things, right? Because what we can't have is we can't get to a point where we're in the room and we're about to do something, and then somebody's like, oh, but what about this? We don't have time for that. That was beforehand. There's no room for debate during a ceremonial process. Because, if the generals are not on the same page, what happens to the soldiers? Dissension. They're like, okay, if you're not leading me, then I need to lead. And then that causes a whole nother issue. And where you see that quite a bit, I mean, when you talk about an Ifa ceremony, you're talking about, sometimes between 10 to 16 testosterone-laden men, and everybody has a right to say something. So, that's why the key figures within a ceremony, the 𝗃𝗏𝗶𝗏, the padrino, the yubona, the cook, those are probably the 4 key positions, maybe the 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗶 as well. They need to at least know everything that needs to happen so that there is no contention per se. But, as far as unifying, I mean, that's happened quite a bit. People fluctuate. Me personally, I'm not a huge fan of electing people that aren't of my house to have a position such as the yubona per se, because those are things that are more house related. I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I direct my own Ifas, but I wouldn't be adverse to somebody else directing them as long as they showed the acumen that I saw that needed to be fit for. But yeah, there's no reason that the movie can't end peacefully. There's no reason for that, but it takes a lot of coordination and organization amongst all of us. So yeah, I don't see why not.
I get it. Okay. No, this was a very good episode. I do have some good news and bad news.
Okay.
What would you want to hear first?
Bad news.
Bad news is that we're pretty much out of time.
Okay. Oh man.
But the good news is, we've got to show some love to the VIPs.
They deserve it. They deserve it.
Everybody, if you're wondering if you want to join the Joseph Baba Ifa membership program, there's a little button right under this video that says join. We have 3 separate tiers for you, all with different perks. So today we're going to shout out just to super fans here, okay?
Super.
So we got 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃.
Oh, thank you.
We got Militia Fraga.
Thank you.
We got Ray Valentine.
Yeah, shout out to Ray.
Mama Magical.
Oh.
Kenya Hutton.
There you go. OG.
Katrina Allen.
Thank you, Katrina.
Shout out to your favorite name, Hemp Lord.
Oh, Hemp Lord. Goated. Guys, thank you so much. 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃more.com is up and running for services and products. We ship. We do shift too. We do shift as well, left and right. The podcast is up and running on all major platforms. Take advantage of it wherever you are. If you can't watch, you could definitely listen. Check out merch as well.
VIPs get
in the membership program.
Yeah, discount on services.
Big
too.
discount, 25% discount. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you from all of us. And until next time, see the light.